The year 1995 was meant to be the dawn of a new age, an era defined by a single, towering figure. One man had been anointed to carry the entire World Wrestling Federation on his broad shoulders into the future. This chosen individual was meticulously groomed to become the successor to Hulk Hogan's throne. The man I'm referring to, of course, is the one and only Diesel, also known as Big Daddy Cool, or by his real name, Kevin Nash. Take your pick. Hailing from Detroit, this colossal 7-footer was handpicked by Vince McMahon himself. He was the company's golden boy. His mission was to guide the WWE from its shadowy struggles into a brilliant and profitable new chapter. The problem was, that promised future simply failed to materialize. Certainly not while Diesel was the one clutching the championship gold. His staggering 358-day tenure as the WWF champion remains one of the most debated and contentious title reigns in the entire annals of professional wrestling. Consider this remarkable fact. His reign was the single longest WWF championship run throughout the entire decade of the 1990s. In an era that gave us legendary figures like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, the iconic Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock, it was astonishingly Diesel who outlasted them all as champion. Despite this impressive statistic, his time at the top is frequently branded an unmitigated disaster. Some critics and fans go even further, condemning it as the absolute worst championship period the company has ever witnessed. So, what exactly went wrong? How could a superstar who had the perfect look, the imposing size, and the full, unwavering support of Vince McMahon end up steering the ship during one of the most abysmal periods in WWE's storied history? Let's meticulously unpack this entire situation. But before we can truly analyze Diesel's championship reign, it is absolutely essential to grasp the landscape of the WWE during that period, because context is the key to understanding everything. The dawn of the 1990s was nothing short of a complete and utter nightmare for Vince McMahon and his entire wrestling empire. We're talking about a catastrophic convergence of public scandals, major talent defections, and crippling financial woes that pushed the WWE to the very brink of collapse. It all began with the infamous steroid scandal. In the year 1991, a ringside doctor named George Zahorian was found guilty of illegally supplying anabolic steroids to a roster of professional wrestlers. The subsequent trial brought shocking details to light, exposing that he had been providing these substances to performers for years, frequently making deliveries straight to the company's corporate headquarters at Titan Tower. This revelation cast an enormous, dark shadow over the WWE, intensifying public skepticism and scrutiny regarding the pervasive use of performance enhancers in the world of professional wrestling. Compounding the issue were Hulk Hogan's appearances on popular programs like the Arsenio Hall Show, where his incredibly muscular build only served to pour gasoline on the already raging fire of controversy. The media relentlessly covered this story, and the promotion's carefully crafted, family-friendly reputation suffered a severe blow. Yet, the troubles were far from over. The fallout from the steroid scandal triggered a huge departure of its top talent. In the single year of 1992, a staggering list of superstars, including Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, the British Bulldog, Sid Justice, and practically any performer with a hyper-muscular physique, vanished from WWE television. The talent roster was left in absolute shambles. Hogan, arguably the most significant star in the history of the sport, had departed. He would later make a game-changing move by signing with rival promotion WCW. The enigmatic Ultimate Warrior was also gone. This left the WWE in a desperate scramble, urgently seeking a fresh crop of stars to become the new face of the company. This crisis marked the beginning of what would be officially branded as the New Generation era. A new breed of performer, younger, physically smaller, but far more technically proficient, was thrust into the main event scene. Stars like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Razor Ramon were given the ball. However, the unforgiving truth of the matter was far from rosy. The new generation era is now widely regarded by both wrestling enthusiasts and even the WWE itself as the period that alienated its audience more than any other time in its history. To give you an idea of the decline, flagship shows like Monday Night Raw were often being recorded in the humble settings of high school gymnasiums. The mid-card and undercard matches were populated with a parade of cringe-worthy character gimmicks, including a wrestling plumber, a wrestling sanitation worker, and even a wrestling race car driver. The talent pool was so incredibly shallow that the annual Royal Rumble event had to bring in wrestlers who weren't even under contract with the company, simply to have enough bodies to fill out the 30-man match. This was the precarious state of the WWE that Diesel was set to inherit. A company engulfed in crisis, featuring a severely depleted roster, and facing an audience that was steadily losing interest and changing the channel. The ambiance inside the arenas during this period was starkly different from the electric glory days of Hulkamania. Attendance had dwindled, and the overall energy from the fans was palpably subdued. A generation of fans weaned on the spectacle of larger-than-life personalities like Hogan, the Macho Man, and the Ultimate Warrior were now expected to emotionally invest in characters like plumbers and garbage collectors. It was a strategy that was failing spectacularly. Simultaneously, the WWE was confronting a growing threat from its competition. World Championship Wrestling, financed by the vast fortune of Ted Turner, was steadily gaining ground and building significant momentum. WCW had landed a massive blow by signing Hulk Hogan in 1994. And even though they were still struggling to utilize him effectively, his presence alone signaled a very real and dangerous threat. The legendary Monday Night Wars had not yet formally erupted, but the foundational battle lines were actively being drawn. It's crucial to remember this entire backdrop as we delve into Diesel's championship run. So, Diesel wasn't stepping into a booming organization with a stacked roster and fervent, sold-out crowds. No, he was essentially being given the captain's wheel of a sinking vessel and tasked with the impossible job of preventing it from going under. Now let's shift our focus to Diesel's remarkable ascent to the pinnacle of the sport. Before his WWE fame, Kevin Nash had a stint in WCW, a period that was, to put it mildly, largely unremarkable and best forgotten. During his time there, he was saddled with a succession of truly awful character concepts. His first incarnation was Master Blaster Steel, a gimmick that featured an utterly absurd-looking mohawk. Following that, he was repackaged as a character named Oz. And yes, it was every bit as bizarre as the name suggests. He would make his way to the ring, adorned in green attire, complete with a wizard's hat and a phony white beard. It was a complete train wreck. His next transformation was into Vinny Vegas, a glib, smart-mouthed gangster persona. None of these characters were connecting with the audience. Then, in 1993, a pivotal moment occurred when Shawn Michaels happened to see Nash on television and personally recommended that the WWE should sign him. Nash eagerly seized the chance and made his WWE debut in June of 1993, introduced as Diesel, the personal bodyguard for Shawn Michaels. The moniker was reportedly the idea of Shane McMahon, a clever play on Nash's Detroit origins in the Motor City. Initially, Diesel's role was strictly to serve as an enforcer, helping Michaels hold on to his Intercontinental Championship. He rarely competed in matches himself. But everything was about to change at the 1994 Royal Rumble. Diesel made his entrance into the Royal Rumble match as the 7th participant, and he proceeded to put on a display of utter dominance. In less than 18 minutes of action, he single-handedly eliminated 7 other competitors. At first, the audience showered him with boos, as he was associated with the universally despised heel Shawn Michaels. However, by the time he was eventually thrown over the top rope, the crowd's reaction had completely flipped, and they were giving him a massive ovation. It was clear to everyone watching that this man had immense potential. He possessed the marketable look, the gigantic stature, and the impressive athleticism that Vince McMahon always coveted in a top star. Throughout the rest of 1994, Diesel's stock just kept soaring. He captured the prestigious Intercontinental Championship from his close, real-life friend, Razor Ramon, albeit with a significant assist from Shawn Michaels. Not long after, he and Michaels teamed up to win the WWE Tag Team Championship, defeating the Head Shrinkers just one night before the major SummerSlam 1994 event. Diesel was experiencing a meteoric rise, an unstoppable force on a hot streak. Behind the scenes and on camera, however, the partnership between Diesel and Michaels was beginning to fracture. The tension boiled over at SummerSlam when Michaels inadvertently delivered a super kick to Diesel. He had been aiming for Razor Ramon, but the mistake cost Diesel his Intercontinental Championship. Even though he was clearly furious, Diesel decided to let it go, chalking it up to just another unfortunate miscommunication between partners. Then, everything came to a head at Survivor Series 1994. During a heated tag team bout, history repeated itself when another one of Michaels' errant super kicks connected squarely with Diesel instead of its intended target, Razor Ramon. This time, however, Diesel's patience had completely evaporated. He snapped, chasing a fleeing Michaels all the way to the backstage area as the entire arena erupted in cheers. The fans were desperate to finally see Diesel give the arrogant Heartbreak Kid his long overdue comeuppance. After the match was over, Michaels frantically grabbed his gear and bolted, theatrically throwing down the WWE Tag Team Championship belt and declaring that his partnership with Diesel was officially finished. Consequently, the tag team titles were declared vacant, leaving Diesel to forge his own path as a singles competitor. But it's precisely at this moment that the story takes a fascinating and unexpected turn. On that very same night at Survivor Series 1994, Bret Hart lost his WWE Championship to Bob Backlund under extremely controversial and questionable circumstances. Backlund, who was a former champion from the early 1980s, had been brought back with a bizarre and unhinged villainous persona. His shocking title victory was never meant to be long-term. It was designed as a transitional reign to set the stage for the next champion. A mere 3 days later, on November 26, 1994, inside the legendary Madison Square Garden, Bob Backlund defended his newly won WWE Championship against the recently embraced fan favorite, Diesel. The match was over in a stunning 8 seconds. Diesel delivered a single, devastating jackknife powerbomb, covered Backlund for the pin, and became the new WWE Champion in the blink of an eye. 8 seconds, that was all it required. Diesel's ascent was meteoric, going from a ringside bodyguard to the world champion in less than 18 months. Moreover, in that landmark year of 1994, he became the first competitor in history to secure the WWE Triple Crown, having held the Intercontinental, Tag Team, and WWE Championships, all within the same 12-month period. The stage was perfectly set. Diesel was now the undisputed top guy in the company, and Vince McMahon had colossal plans for him. Diesel's first major championship defense was scheduled for the Royal Rumble in 1995 against Bret Hart. Now, it's crucial to remember that Bret was a highly decorated, former 2-time WWE champion, and was widely considered to be the most proficient technical wrestler in the entire company. This booking created a rare babyface versus babyface matchup, which was an unusual dynamic for the time. But both men were so immensely popular that the crowd was audibly divided in their support. The match itself was absolutely outstanding. Bret strategically focused his attack on Diesel's knee for the entire duration of the contest, masterfully applying the figure-4 leg lock on multiple occasions to wear the big man down. Diesel had to rely on his incredible size and raw power to fight back against the relentless assault. At one point, in a moment of brilliant and vicious innovation, Bret actually used athletic tape to tie Diesel's legs to the ring post and proceeded to kick him repeatedly. This was the essence of Bret Hart's in-ring storytelling. He would find a weakness, isolate a body part, and then systematically work to destroy it. What truly elevated this match was the incredible contrast in their respective styles. You had Bret, the technical wizard, the master craftsman who could literally wrestle circles around almost anyone he stepped in the ring with. Then you had Diesel, the unstoppable powerhouse, the giant who could end a match in an instant if he could just connect with his signature jackknife powerbomb. The core tension of the match revolved around whether Diesel could endure Bret's methodical attack long enough to land his finishing move, or if the relentless assault on his knee would ultimately neutralize him. The contest swayed back and forth with several thrilling near falls. It seemed to be over when Diesel finally hit the jackknife powerbomb and had the champion seemingly pinned. But before the referee could complete the 3 count, Shawn Michaels suddenly sprinted from the back and launched a shocking attack on Diesel. The audience was stunned into silence. In a highly unorthodox decision, the referee ordered the match to continue, which only intensified the drama. Seizing the chaos, Bret locked in his sharpshooter, only for his brother, Owen Hart, to interfere and attack him. The situation devolved into utter chaos. Even Bob Backlund got involved, assaulting Bret as a measure of revenge for losing the championship. Eventually, the referee lost all control of the proceedings, and the match was declared a draw, allowing Diesel to retain his title. Esteemed wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer awarded the match a stellar 4.25 stars. It was a truly spectacular way to begin a title reign. While the finish was certainly messy, it cleverly protected both competitors and established multiple storylines for the future. Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels went on to win the Royal Rumble match, achieving the incredible feat of entering at number 1 and outlasting 29 other superstars. This victory set up a monumental championship match between the two former friends at WrestleMania 11. WrestleMania 11 occurred on April 2, 1995, at the Hartford Civic Center. And it's at this event that we get a very telling glimpse into how the company truly viewed Diesel's status. The WWE Championship match between the champion Diesel and challenger Shawn Michaels was not positioned as the main event. Instead, that coveted final spot on the card was given to a match between NFL linebacker Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow. That is correct. A football player with absolutely no professional wrestling experience was headlining the biggest show of the year over the promotion's most prestigious championship match. This decision speaks volumes about the level of desperation the company felt for mainstream attention during that period. Just stop and consider the message that sends to the audience and the locker room. You have your world champion, the person who is supposed to be the face of your company, and you are explicitly telling the world that a celebrity spectacle is more important than his title defense. When you truly analyze it, the move is profoundly insulting. The organization was far more concerned with garnering mainstream press than it was with properly building and solidifying its own champion. This would sadly become a persistent theme throughout the entirety of Diesel's reign. But let's discuss the quality of the match itself. Diesel versus Shawn Michaels was actually an exceptionally good wrestling match. These two performers had an undeniable and fantastic chemistry with one another, which makes perfect sense given their well-known real-life friendship as key members of the backstage group called The Clique. Michaels made his way to the ring accompanied by his new colossal bodyguard, Psycho Sid, while Diesel entered with global superstar Pamela Anderson, who was originally meant to accompany the Royal Rumble winner, but decided to align with Diesel instead. Jenny McCarthy was brought in as a replacement to stand with Michaels. It was the absolute peak of mid-1990s celebrity involvement, which even included Jonathan Taylor Thomas from the show Home Improvement serving as the guest timekeeper. The match itself managed to tell a great story amidst all the spectacle. Michaels utilized his superior speed and agility to try and outmaneuver the larger champion, whereas Diesel used his immense power to dominate the action whenever he could get his hands on Shawn. There was also a significant moment of controversy where Michaels had Diesel pinned while illegally using his feet on the ropes for extra leverage, but the referee astutely caught the infraction. In the end, Diesel finally hit the decisive jackknife powerbomb and pinned Michaels cleanly in the middle of the ring to retain his championship in a hard-fought victory. Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine named this contest their Match of the Year for 1995. The crowd was incredibly vocal, the in-ring action was superb, and both men came out of the encounter looking like major stars. This moment should have been the definitive launchpad for an absolutely incredible and historic championship reign. But instead, things began to deteriorate very, very quickly. After WrestleMania, one would assume that the next logical step would be to either continue the incredibly personal Diesel versus Michaels feud, or perhaps transition Diesel into a program with another top-tier opponent. But that is not at all what transpired. Instead, Vince McMahon became seemingly obsessed with booking Diesel in a series of big man versus big man feuds. And this is the point where the championship reign truly began to suffer. First on the list was Psycho Sid. Sid had just turned on Shawn Michaels the night after WrestleMania, brutally attacking him with multiple powerbombs in a shocking betrayal. Diesel ran in to rescue Michaels from the assault, and in that moment, the two former rivals were suddenly allies once again, reuniting their popular tag team known as Two Dudes with Attitudes. Diesel was then slated to defend his WWE Championship against Sid at the very first In Your House pay-per-view event in May of 1995. The match that followed was a slow and plodding contest. When you place two men who are both close to 7 feet tall in the ring together, you are simply not going to get a technical wrestling masterpiece. The match concluded with a disqualification victory for Diesel, thanks to Tataka's interference. This outcome allowed him to hold on to the championship, but it also guaranteed that this heated rivalry was destined to continue. Their second encounter went down at In Your House 2 that July, this time contested as a lumberjack match. Diesel emerged victorious after about 10 minutes, finishing the bout with a thunderous big boot to the face. While this follow-up match was a marginal improvement, it was still a far cry from being anything memorable. The entire feud with Sid had ultimately done nothing to elevate Diesel's status or to draw any significant money for the company. And it was at this point that things went from bad to truly awful. During the 1995 King of the Ring tournament, Mabel managed to win the whole thing, overcoming Savio Vega in the final round. This was Mabel, a wrestler who had consistently been a tag team performer and had never once been positioned anywhere near the main event picture. The company made the stunning decision to push him as King Mabel, rewarding him with a WWE Championship match at SummerSlam. Now, I really need to emphasize why this move was such an unmitigated catastrophe. Mabel was a 500-pound man with exceptionally limited in-ring talent. He was slow, his technique was sloppy, and he simply had no business competing in a main event match for the world title. The 1995 King of the Ring pay-per-view is often pointed to as one of the most abysmal events in the company's long history. One critic famously assigned it a rating of 1 out of 10, labeling it one of the worst WWE pay-per-views ever staged. And Mabel's inexplicable tournament win was a significant factor in that negative reception. The decision to elevate Mabel to such a prominent spot was a baffling move that confused just about everyone. Here was a guy who had dedicated his entire career to the tag team division as a member of Men on a Mission. He possessed absolutely no credibility or fan support as a singles competitor. He was incapable of delivering a compelling match. His interviews and on-camera promos were utterly forgettable. And yet, against all logic, the company decided that this was the individual who deserved to challenge for the World Championship at their second biggest show of the year. Some insiders have theorized that Vince McMahon became obsessed with the idea of monster villains during this time. He desperately wanted his heroic babyface champion to slay massive giants, much like Hulk Hogan had successfully done throughout the 1980s. The fundamental problem with that logic was that Hogan was facing off against genuinely athletic big men like Andre the Giant and King Kong Bundy, guys who could actually perform. Mabel was just a very large man. That was the entirety of his gimmick. The build-up to SummerSlam was exceptionally rough and poorly executed. During Diesel's lumberjack match against Sid at In Your House 2, King Mabel, who was serving as one of the lumberjacks, assaulted Diesel and hurled him into the steel ring steps. The weeks that followed featured more similar attacks from Mabel. Then, in an incredibly bizarre booking choice, the British Bulldog shockingly turned heel and ambushed Diesel on Raw, seemingly establishing a brand new feud for the champion. But then, the Bulldog was nowhere to be found at SummerSlam. He simply vanished from the entire storyline without any explanation. Instead, Lex Luger appeared in what would become his final WWE appearance to lend Diesel a hand. It made absolutely no sense. SummerSlam 1995 was held in Pittsburgh, and its main event saw Diesel defending the WWE Championship against King Mabel. The match was an absolute train wreck, just dreadful from start to finish. Diesel attempted to start the match with some basic forearms and clotheslines. But when you are working with a 500-pound opponent who can hardly move, your creative options are severely limited. The match was filled with lengthy rest holds and painfully slow-motion action. At one point in the match, Mabel delivered a sit-down splash to Diesel that legitimately caused an injury. Diesel has since confirmed that the splash resulted in permanent back damage that has affected him for the rest of his career. After about 9 minutes of agonizing action, Diesel finally secured the win with a clothesline off the second rope. He managed to retain the championship, but you have to question the physical toll. This particular contest is widely considered to be one of the worst SummerSlam main events of all time. The storyline leading up to it was not good. The match itself was even worse, and it provided no benefit to either competitor, making Mabel's King of the Ring victory completely and utterly pointless. And here is the real kicker. The show generated a meager 0.9 buy rate, which was a substantial decrease from SummerSlam 1994. It was clear that people were tuning out. To compound the problem, the match that immediately followed Diesel versus Mabel on the card was the spectacular ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental Championship. That match was absolutely phenomenal, considered by many to be one of the best of the entire year. So you were left with this incredible, show-stealing ladder match completely overshadowing the WWE Championship main event. That is never a flattering situation for your world champion. Let's take a moment to step back and analyze Diesel's title reign from a business standpoint, because this is where the most intense criticism truly originates. During 1995, the year in which Diesel held the championship for 11 months, the WWE only achieved 2 sellouts with an attendance of over 10,000 people. Those 2 events were WrestleMania 11 and SummerSlam 1995. That was it. The house show business was completely tanking. When Diesel won the WWE Championship at Madison Square Garden, there were only 7,000 fans inside the building. Madison Square Garden, known as the Mecca of professional wrestling, and they couldn't even manage to fill it. The pay-per-view numbers were just as discouraging. WrestleMania 11 lost 80,000 buyers when compared to the prior year. SummerSlam 1995 was down by 95,000 buys from SummerSlam 1994. Survivor Series 1995 recorded only 128,000 buys, a dramatic drop from 254,000 in 1994. That represents nearly half of the entire audience disappearing in just 1 year. As a result, Diesel has often been branded the lowest-drawing WWE champion in the company's history. Now, there is some ongoing debate about this particular label. Some analysts argue that Shawn Michaels' subsequent championship reign actually drew even worse numbers. Others will point out that JBL's championship run from 2004 to 2005 was also incredibly detrimental for business. But the undeniable fact is that business declined dramatically during Diesel's period on top. Bruce Pritchard, who was a WWE producer during that era, has spoken at length about this. He confirmed that when Diesel won the championship at Madison Square Garden, there were indeed only 7,000 fans in attendance. He emphasized that 7,000 fans in a city like Huntsville, Alabama, would be a tremendous success. But 7,000 fans in Madison Square Garden means you almost certainly lost money just by running the building. Pritchard also shared a revealing story about a time he confronted Diesel about the poor numbers. Diesel reportedly said to him, "You know, I'm the lowest-earning WWE champion of all time." And Pritchard's sharp reply was, "Well, it goes hand in hand with being the lowest-drawing WWE champion." Apparently, they exchanged some heated words after that interaction. But this all begs the question, is it really fair to blame Diesel entirely for these dismal figures? The entire product was facing immense struggles. The active roster was quite thin. The character gimmicks were often terrible. Meanwhile, WCW was beginning to build serious momentum and would soon launch Monday Nitro in September of 1995. The wrestling industry as a whole was in the midst of a significant transitional phase. There is, however, an interesting statistic that directly contradicts the common narrative. Raw set an all-time record on April 24, 1995, for a Diesel versus Bam Bam Bigelow title match, pulling a 3.9 rating and reaching 2.28 million homes. That was the largest audience to watch pro wrestling in the United States since the legendary Hogan vs. Flair title match in August 1994. So it was evident that Diesel could attract viewers under the proper circumstances. The bigger issue was that the WWE expanded its schedule from 5 pay-per-views in 1994 to a full 10 pay-per-views in 1995. They had effectively oversaturated and diluted their own product. Many of those new in-your-house shows were only 2 hours long, which naturally resulted in lower buy rates. The direct comparison of pay-per-view numbers to 1994 is not entirely fair. And let's not overlook who Diesel was competing against during this time. At first, he was working programs with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, 2 of the finest in-ring performers in the company. Those matches were quite good, but then he found himself stuck working with Sid and Mabel. These were big man versus big man matches that were slow, plodding, and incredibly boring to watch. There's only so much you can achieve when your rivals aren't performing at the highest level. After the unmitigated disaster against Mabel, the final chapter of Diesel's reign truly began. He maintained the Two Dudes with Attitudes team with Shawn Michaels, and the pair enjoyed a remarkably entertaining run, culminating at In Your House 3 in September of 1995. They laid down a challenge to Owen Hart and Yokozuna for the WWE Tag Team Championship in a high-stakes, winner-take-all match where all 3 championships were on the line. Diesel's WWE Championship, Michaels' Intercontinental Championship, and the Tag Team Championship were all hanging in the balance. It was a wonderfully imaginative idea, although they were ultimately unsuccessful in the match. Diesel then transitioned into a heated feud with the British Bulldog, who had strategically aligned himself with Owen Hart and the Anvil as part of the Camp Cornette faction. At In Your House 4, Diesel defended his title against the Bulldog, while Bret Hart provided special guest commentary. In a shocking turn, Bret interfered in the contest by attacking Bulldog, leading to Diesel's disqualification. While he retained the championship, he was absolutely livid about the unsolicited interference. A massive brawl erupted between Diesel and Bret following the match, perfectly planting the seeds for their eventual epic confrontation. This was, in fact, an exceptionally clever piece of storytelling. It masterfully created a palpable tension between two of the company's top fan favorites and gave the audience a compelling storyline to anticipate. WWE President Gorilla Monsoon officially signed a WWE Championship showdown between Diesel and Bret Hart for the 1995 Survivor Series. The bout was made a no disqualification match, which added an extra layer of delicious intrigue. Diesel and Bret had already battled for the title on 2 previous occasions. At the King of the Ring event in 1994, Bret defended his title against Diesel and managed to win by disqualification. Then, at the 1995 Royal Rumble, their match concluded in a controversial draw. This meant that their Survivor Series encounter would serve as the definitive rubber match. And on this occasion, a clear winner was absolutely mandatory. The match at Survivor Series 1995 is genuinely considered one of the most outstanding matches in the careers of both men. It was intensely violent, filled with drama, and it told a magnificent story inside the ring. This was Diesel's golden opportunity to prove he could deliver on the grandest stage. And to his immense credit, he unequivocally rose to the occasion. Immediately from the opening bell, both athletes deliberately untied the top turnbuckle pads, exposing the unforgiving steel underneath. As a no disqualification match, the rules were thrown out the window. The implication was perfectly clear. These two were embarking on a brutal war, and there was a significant chance that one of them would not be leaving under their own power. Bret shrewdly focused his offensive strategy on Diesel's knee, attempting to dismantle his powerful foundation. He applied the figure-4 leg lock and worked over the limb with methodical precision. This was a textbook example of Bret Hart's ring psychology. Every single move that Bret executed had a clear and distinct purpose. He wasn't simply executing moves to fill time. He was systematically breaking down Diesel's leg to render the jackknife powerbomb an impossibility. Diesel, for his part, sold the debilitating leg work with masterful conviction. He was visibly hobbling around the ring, wincing with every step. But he bravely continued to fight back with his signature power moves whenever he could create an opening. The crowd was thoroughly invested in both wrestlers. The atmosphere was electric. This felt like a genuine, bitter fight between two competitors who harbored a sincere dislike for one another. The action soon spilled to the outside, and it was at this point that things became truly wild. Diesel overpowered Bret on the floor, and then, in a moment that sent shockwaves through the arena, he launched Bret crashing through the Spanish announce table. This was 1995. Tables were not being broken on a weekly basis like they would be just a few years later. This felt incredibly dangerous and shockingly real. After returning to the ring, Diesel positioned himself for the jackknife powerbomb. He lifted Bret into the air, but Bret, appearing to be on the verge of unconsciousness, suddenly collapsed. Diesel attempted to lift him again, but Bret had been cleverly playing possum the entire time. He swiftly hooked Diesel's leg and rolled him up into a small package, securing the 3 count and winning his 3rd WWE Championship. After 358 days, Diesel's reign had concluded. But the story did not conclude there. A completely enraged Diesel unleashed a ferocious attack on the new champion after the bell. He smashed Bret with not 1, but 2 thunderous jackknife powerbombs, leaving the hitman motionless in the ring. This moment signaled the beginning of Diesel's compelling tweener turn. He was no longer the crowd-pleasing, smiling babyface. He had become a man who was completely indifferent to what the fans thought of him. If they cheered him, wonderful. If they jeered him, he truly did not care. This iteration of the Diesel character was significantly more interesting than the version during his championship reign. He now had a menacing edge. He possessed a defiant attitude. And, ironically, This very character would become the template for his groundbreaking work in WCW just a few months later. Following Survivor Series, Diesel was still a main event player, though he was no longer champion. At In Your House 5 in December, he scored a victory over Owen Hart, who had been responsible for injuring Shawn Michaels. At the Royal Rumble in 1996, Diesel entered the match at number 22 and was the very last man eliminated, being sent over the top rope by a super kick from the winner, Shawn Michaels. In the aftermath, Diesel teased an attack on Michaels before surprisingly offering him a high five. The audience was left confused. But then Diesel committed an act that solidified his complete heel turn. He interfered in the main event clash between The Undertaker and WWE Champion Bret Hart, a move that ultimately cost The Undertaker the match. This action immediately set up a rivalry between Diesel and The Undertaker, with their first confrontation taking place at In Your House 6 in February of 1996. Diesel challenged Bret Hart for the WWE Championship inside a steel cage, but he lost the match after The Undertaker made his presence felt and attacked him in retaliation. At this juncture, Diesel's career in the WWE was clearly winding down. His contract was nearing its expiration, and WCW was making massive, guaranteed financial offers to WWE talent. Eric Bischoff was opening up his checkbook and actively trying to poach the WWE's most valuable stars. Scott Hall, Diesel's very close friend and fellow Clique member, became the first major talent to sign with WCW. When Hall shared the details of the money being offered, it was simply too substantial to dismiss. WCW was presenting a 3-year, guaranteed contract worth millions of dollars, with a much lighter schedule than the WWE. Triple H later recounted that Diesel was not initially keen on leaving the promotion. He stated that Diesel was in a situation where they were offering an absurd amount of money, yet he still felt a strong reluctance to go. Ultimately, Diesel's wife essentially instructed him to take the deal. She was no longer willing to raise their child mostly by herself due to the punishing WWE road schedule. Diesel provided Vince McMahon with an opportunity to match or exceed the offer, but the WWE was financially unable to compete with what WCW was paying. The company was experiencing financial losses. They simply did not have the capital to compete in a bidding war. Diesel's final appearance on WWE television was at In Your House 7, Good Friends, Better Enemies, in April of 1996. He stepped up to challenge Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship in a contest that proved to be an absolutely phenomenal match. And, despite already planning his exit, Diesel delivered one of the most compelling performances of his entire career. For nearly 18 intense minutes, he and Michaels absolutely electrified the audience, before Michaels finally secured the victory with a well-placed sweet chin music. What followed the bell, however, was one of the most notorious and controversial moments in the annals of wrestling, the infamous curtain call. It all went down at a house show in the legendary Madison Square Garden, where both Diesel and Razor Ramon were competing in their farewell matches before their highly anticipated jump to WCW. Following the conclusion of the main event, all 4 members of the influential backstage group known as the Clique, Diesel, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H, publicly embraced in the center of the ring, celebrating their friendship in a moment that shattered kayfabe for the business and the fans watching. Since Triple H was the only one of the quartet who was neither a top-tier star nor departing the company, he was the one designated to absorb all the backstage punishment for the incident. His scheduled King of the Ring tournament win was consequently given to Steve Austin, and as they say, the rest became wrestling history. Merely a few weeks after this, Diesel made his explosive debut in WCW, rebranding himself as Kevin Nash, and immediately forming the iconic tag team, The Outsiders, with his friend Scott Hall. They arrived on the scene as hostile invaders, with a storyline suggesting they were still employed by the WWE, an angle that WCW had to significantly dial back because of escalating legal pressures. At the Bash at the Beach event in 1996, their duo expanded when they were joined by Hulk Hogan, who sent shockwaves through the entire industry by turning his back on his fans, becoming a heel, and founding the New World Order. The NWO rapidly evolved into one of the most sensational and successful angles in the history of professional wrestling, propelling WCW to dominate the Monday Night Wars for the subsequent 2 years. The difference between Diesel's run in WWE and Kevin Nash's tenure in WCW is truly astonishing. While in the WWE, he was presented as a struggling babyface champion who simply failed to draw significant crowds. Conversely, in WCW, he transformed into a cool, arrogant heel who was overflowing with natural charisma. The approach to his character was a complete 180-degree turn. Nash was finally given the freedom to just be himself, to tell jokes, to carry himself with an air of arrogance, to feel authentic, and the audience connected with it on a massive scale. The New World Order fundamentally altered the landscape of professional wrestling for good. This new faction masterfully blurred the established boundaries between on-screen fiction and off-screen reality. It single-handedly made the concept of being a villain something to be admired. It gave rise to a legion of imitators across the industry and heavily influenced the WWE's very own Attitude Era. And Kevin Nash stood proudly as one of the 3 original founding members of this revolutionary group. This brings us to the ultimate delicious irony. Kevin Nash, the very same individual who was deemed unable to draw a crowd as the WWE champion, reinvented himself to become one of the most prominent and bankable stars in the entire wrestling world as a pillar of the NWO. He would go on to capture the WCW World Heavyweight Championship on 4 separate occasions and claim the WCW World Tag Team Championship an incredible 9 times. He was a certified main event player for many years to come. The departure of Nash and Scott Hall to WCW is widely pointed to as the primary catalyst that forced Vince McMahon's hand, leading him to begin offering guaranteed contracts to his roster of performers. Before this major shift, WWE wrestlers operated without the kind of long-term financial stability that WCW was famously providing. McMahon astutely recognized that he had to adapt his business model or face the very real possibility of losing his entire roster. That strategic decision turned out to be absolutely vital for the company's survival in the long run, as it was instrumental in stabilizing the locker room and ultimately allowing them to truly compete with WCW. This brings us circling back to the question that started this whole discussion. Just how successful was Diesel's 358-day reign as the WWE champion? Well, allow me to frame it for you in a slightly different manner. Can we genuinely classify it as a true championship reign in the first place? What I'm getting at is that a champion is meant to be positioned at the apex of the company, held in the absolute highest esteem. The champion is supposed to be the one headlining all the major cards and serving as the undeniable centerpiece of the entire promotion. Yet, for the majority of Diesel's time with the belt, it consistently felt as though he was treated more like a secondary concern or an afterthought. Consider WrestleMania 11, where the WWE Championship match was relegated to the co-main event slot. The honor of closing the biggest show of the year was given to Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Then, at SummerSlam 1995, the supposed main event, featuring Diesel against Mabel, was utterly and completely eclipsed by the groundbreaking ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. The WWE was in such a state of desperation for any mainstream publicity that they were consistently willing to prioritize celebrity appearances and even Intercontinental Championship matches over their own world champion and his opponents. Diesel began his championship run by competing against Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, who were undeniably two of the most gifted professional wrestlers on the planet. Those encounters were consistently good, sometimes even bordering on great. But his momentum was then derailed when he was booked against Sid and Mabel, a pair of lumbering big men who lacked in-ring skill and had absolutely no credibility in main event programs. The overall quality of his championship reign took a significant nosedive directly because of the caliber of opponents Diesel was forced to share the ring with. A compelling argument could even be made that Diesel was deliberately positioned for failure from the start. He was handed the championship during a period of deep corporate crisis. The active roster had been severely depleted of top-tier talent, and recent scandals had profoundly tarnished the WWE's public image. Meanwhile, WCW was experiencing a meteoric rise. The WWE's on-screen product felt stale and outdated, with Vince McMahon relentlessly pushing over-the-top, cartoonish gimmicks that the audience had long since grown weary of in that climate. In that kind of environment, could any superstar have truly thrived as the champion? Yet, at the same time, we must also concede that Diesel himself didn't exactly set the wrestling world ablaze with his performance. His on-screen persona was remarkably bland. He transitioned from being a cool, confident, and intimidating heel bodyguard to a generic, perpetually smiling babyface. The very edge that had made him a compelling character was completely stripped away. His entrance music sounded like it was lifted directly from the sitcom Roseanne, a theme that hardly screams top-tier main event attraction. He was essentially a gimmick who was only just beginning to display hints of a real personality as his reign was concluding. A significant part of the issue was that Diesel's babyface persona was completely one-dimensional. He was just a large man who would smile, offer a thumbs up to the crowd, and then deliver his jackknife powerbomb finisher. That was the entire package. There was no compelling edge, no layers of complexity, and ultimately no substantial reason for the audience to become emotionally invested in him, beyond the superficial facts that he was big and held the championship belt. You can contrast that with the characters that found immense success later in that same decade. Stone Cold Steve Austin was a deeply complex anti-hero who lived by his own set of rules and defied authority. The Rock was an exceptionally arrogant yet charismatic entertainer who could effortlessly make audiences adore or despise him. Even Bret Hart possessed incredible depth, skillfully portraying either the noble fighting champion or the embittered anti-American heel, depending on the specific storyline. In comparison, Diesel was just present. The WWE did attempt a late-game course correction near the end of his title reign by turning him into a tweener, but by that point, it was far too little, too late. The damage to his credibility was already done, and he was effectively already heading out the door. It really makes you contemplate what could have been if the creative team had just allowed Diesel to maintain his original intimidating edge from the very beginning. What if he had never been transformed into that smiling, crowd-pleasing babyface? What if he had consistently been portrayed as the cool, I don't give a damn character that he so effectively became immediately after losing the championship title? The hard business figures from that era are impossible to ignore. Attendance for house shows plummeted. The buy rates for pay-per-view events were way down. Television ratings were in a steady decline. The WWE was hemorrhaging an alarming amount of money during that period. You can certainly debate whether the blame falls squarely on Diesel's shoulders or on the challenging circumstances surrounding him, but the undeniable fact is that the company was struggling profoundly during his tenure at the top. And yet, amidst the difficulties, there were undeniable bright spots. His series of matches with Bret Hart, particularly their encounters at Royal Rumble 1995 and Survivor Series 1995, were genuinely outstanding contests. The showdown with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 11 was a legitimate match of the year contender. It proved that when Diesel was placed in the ring with exceptionally talented adversaries, he was more than capable of delivering a great performance. He was certainly not a technical master in the ring like Bret Hart, but he could absolutely be guided to very good matches when paired with the right kind of opponent. In retrospect, the post-title tweener evolution was arguably the most captivating phase of Diesel's entire WWE run. The moment he abandoned the forced persona of the smiling, clean-cut hero and fully embraced the role of an imposing figure who simply didn't care what anyone thought, he became an absolutely compelling character. That darker, more authentic version of him would have been infinitely more successful as a champion. Unfortunately, by the time the creative team finally grasped this concept, he was already negotiating his exit and preparing for his move to WCW. In the final analysis, Diesel's 358-day reign serves as a stark cautionary tale in the annals of wrestling. It perfectly illustrates the disastrous consequences of pushing a miscast talent at the absolute worst time and pairing them against a string of underwhelming opponents who failed to generate any excitement. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that sheer size and a marketable look are not nearly enough to carry a championship run. It shows that even with the complete and total backing of a visionary like Vince McMahon, you cannot artificially manufacture a star if the surrounding circumstances are completely wrong. But the saga also powerfully demonstrates that a significant failure in one environment doesn't destine a performer for failure everywhere. Kevin Nash would go on to build an incredibly lucrative and wildly successful career for himself in WCW. He wasn't just another wrestler there. He was a founding member of one of the most game-changing factions in the entire history of the sport. He was a constant fixture in main events, headlined massive pay-per-views, and helped sell out arenas across the country. He definitively proved that he possessed the star power to draw significant money when placed in the right situations. So, with that in mind, was Diesel's WWE Championship reign actually good? To be perfectly honest, no, it absolutely was not. The quality of his matches was wildly inconsistent from one night to the next. The storylines he was involved in were frequently nonsensical and poorly conceived. The business itself saw a noticeable decline during his time on top. When viewed through nearly any objective lens, the entire championship run has to be considered a failure. But was all of that failure entirely Diesel's fault? That question is far more complicated and much harder to answer. The truth is, he was dealt an exceptionally bad hand, and arguably did the best he could with the subpar material he was given. The company's foundation around him was showing major cracks and beginning to crumble. The opponents chosen for him were largely subpar and uninspiring. The entire creative direction for the company felt completely lost and without a clear vision for the future. In a different era, with a more robust and talented roster, things might have unfolded in a dramatically different way for him. When you consider the circumstances, it's hardly surprising that Diesel made the jump to WCW. The WWE, at that point, had virtually nothing left to offer a talent of his stature. He had already been their top champion for the better part of a year, and what was his reward for that long reign? He was stuck feuding with the likes of Mabel and Sid in arenas that were often half empty. The grass was undeniably greener in WCW, and a savvy businessman like Nash knew it instantly. Looking back on it now with the benefit of hindsight, Diesel's reign truly represents a crucial turning point in WWE's long history. It felt like the final, dying breath of the old, cartoonish guard, right before the Attitude Era would arrive and change the industry forever. Just within a few short years, the WWE landscape would be completely dominated by edgier, more provocative content, led by icons like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and D-Generation X. The over-the-top, cartoonish gimmicks of the past were about to be retired for good. The company's family-friendly image would be shattered and replaced with something far more raw, unpredictable, and real. But back in 1994 and 1995, none of that revolutionary change had occurred yet. Diesel found himself trapped as the champion of a company mired in a severe identity crisis. And, as a direct result, his championship reign was doomed to suffer and ultimately fail. I'd love to hear from you, so let me know down in the comments what you think about Diesel's championship reign. Do you believe he was the worst drawing champion of all time? Or was he merely a talented victim of unfortunate circumstances? Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for 100 years of good luck. I'll see you on the next one.